All right, good evening. The time is now 6:05. It's May 21st of 2024, and we are calling the Finance and Administration meeting to order. Thank you all for attending. City Clerk Dean, will you please note the attendance? Yes. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Holloway is unable to attend this evening and has requested that he be excused. Is there any opposition?
Nope.
Okay, in that case, he is excused. The next item up will be the agenda approval. Councilmember Johnson, have you had a chance to review?
I have, and I'm just re-pulling it back up, just to double check. No suggested.
All right. In that case, the agenda is approved. The next item up will be public comment. At this time, we typically ask whether there are any members of the public who would like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda. At this time, we are taking live comments from folks who are in council chambers. And if anyone who's listening online would like to provide comment, they are more than welcome to email city council members at any time. We will go ahead and review those. Seeing no one in chambers who's here to speak, we'll go ahead and move on to the approval of warrants and claims. I have received no emails with questions about the warrants and claims. Councilmember Johnson, any questions or concerns?
Only that we might have skipped the minutes.
Well, thank you. In that case, we'll go ahead and go back to the minutes. These are the minutes dated May 7th of 2024. Any concerns with the minutes?
No.
All right. Hearing none, the minutes are approved. And now we are actually going to go ahead and do the warrants and claims. So did you have any concerns with those?
No.
All right. Hearing none, those are approved to go on to council as well. Next up, as we are rolling quickly through these, there are no agenda bills. And so the next item up will be the update to the financial policies. We have Director Boutte.
All right, so before we begin, I'm going to hand out some materials. Just got a few updates. Maybe overall, the drafts. All right, so we've got some updates, right, that we made overall to the policies, taking in more information from the administration overall, and really getting the mayor's perspective when it comes to financial management policies. Just to give some background to everyone that's present here, a complete revision of the city's financial management policy took place over multiple months in 2022. It's developed concurrently with the 23-24 biennial budget and borrowed heavily from this plus financial management policy. We've had 2 years to put the financial management policy back into practice, and now we're kind of returning to you with some proposed updates. It's normal for us to do that every 2 years. And really, the importance of the city's financial management guidance for financial decision-making procedures will come after this. They help to cover, procedures help to cover those detailed steps necessary to carry out policy. As kind of stated before, the goal is to really clean up and or clarify the financial management policy as much as we have time for to ensure that it's working for us and reflecting our current circumstances. Also helps to provide a good reminder for everyone of what's in the financial management policy. If we need to do a longer cleanup effort, if it's necessary, it should really take place on the off-budget year. When it comes to this, we have made some updates to it since our last conversation, but as I said, also getting the mayor's perspective on the financial management policy too. As council requested, we did update, actually add fund type definitions overall to the beginning. And so the changes that you're actually going to see from the previous version, the May 7th version, towards this one is highlighted in yellow for your benefit within the overall policy document itself. In addition to that, for other sections as well within the reserve and fund balance section, we also changed out some words. So we exchanged the word should for may in regards to fund balances within the other managerial fund section as well. A lot of that stemmed from the conversation with council previously. In addition to that, we also modified the word should in the last sentence of our reserve level target 2.4 governmental operating. That was changed to may as well. We would note that there are some funds where maybe we don't necessarily need a reserve, And we just want to be able to make decisions about what funds should be reserved versus what shouldn't within those two broad fund types overall. Questions?
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. So with respect to changing should to may for 2.3.3 for other managerial funds, that was the discussion that we got into last time when you were speaking to, for example, I think it was like Arts Commission, it was police.
Yeah.
And I want to say it had to do with the drug, the funds basically that go towards drug enforcement, right?
Yeah.
So were you able to figure out how much those would be if we were to go forward and
So I haven't
I
had time to
should.
really look at
Okay.
those or to calculate those quite yet. So no, haven't.
that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that I asked the question as it came up. So thank you. Councilor Johnson.
And then just making sure that I got this, that the for the general fund, the overall reserve is in the something like must be that certain level rather than may. I'm not
Yes,
sure.
that is
Yeah.
correct. So that would remain basically as it should.
Yeah, so it's like special revenue says may and the managerial funds.
Correct. So it's not modifying anything from the general fund, the enterprise funds, as well as your governmental capital fund. So a lot of the important ones are covered. So you're that. Just to refresh everyone's kind of memory for the most part, we did recommend some changes overall for reserves to the different fund types. We know that the current policy in place doesn't really assess the fund or the reserve levels that we need for generally governmental operate our managerial funds, our special revenue funds, or our non-utilities capital fund, or internal service funds as well. And so there's a larger clean up effort to make sure that we can cover all of our bases when it comes to kind of our funds, and that we cover, as I said, we cover all our bases. So with that said, in addition to that, we have also updated section 2.90, which was previously termed as excess reserves, and we've renamed that excess fund balances overall. What we state within that section is fund balances above the targeted reserve level should be used for new expenditures, with emphasis on one-time uses that achieve future operating cost reductions, capital asset investments with the long-term benefit or prepaying existing debt, use and a previously said use of excess reserves shall be determined by council. Now that we've restated this as use of excess fund balance above a reserve target of 20% or the reserve level target as specified under sections 2.5 and 2.6, which 2.5 and 2.6 are both the non-utilities capital, and 2.6 is your enterprise funds overall, may be determined by the administration subject to the approval authority of council as expressed in other sections of this policy. So we just want to be clear that if we're going to use it for anything, we have to, what's important to this is the purchasing thresholds, right, overall. So if we're within budget, but we know that the fund balance is greater than, say, 30%, we don't want to be necessarily beholden to having to come to council to say, hey, we're within budget, even though the fund balance is above 30%, we need to come back to council. It's just, it doesn't make sense in relative to the other elements that we have or sections that we have within this policy itself. So we just wanted clarity when it comes to that overall about where does the mayor's authority start versus where does council's authority start overall.
Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, and that was again within I believe what this is referring to with the authority of council is that there are those different numbers that up to that amount the administration can go ahead and just do it without coming to council. And like if it's a $30 million project, you can just say, oh yeah, we're just going to take all this, right? It still comes to council.
Yeah. So just going back over some old materials. So 3.1 was changed previously to incorporate basically a section that would, we're working within our utility rate study to bring customer classes back into alignment with their respective cost of service. And we just wanted to make sure that that was called out appropriately within 3.1. In terms of the purchasing and contract commitment thresholds, this is where you'll find a comment in your packet. And just for page references, page 12. I think overall, when it comes to the table, We noted previously that the purchasing contract commitment threshold matrix as a part of this policy did not match SMC section 2.90. And there were some questions about whether we should have incorporate the contract matrix within the financial management policy and then reference it in SMC, or it should be in the SMC and just reference the financial management policies. And we're having Madrona Law Group look into whether which way is kind of best overall when it comes to that situation. In addition to that, previously, we had talked about a budget scope and basis that the city will adopt budgets for all funds, functional classifications, and capital programs and projects as established by council, just making that explicitly clear. We've also added a section 5.6.2 personnel adjustments, stating that any personnel adjustment that increases the city's ongoing expenditures relative to ongoing revenue, changes service levels as established by council requires legislative approval. Any personnel adjustment that does not lead to an increase in ongoing expenditures relative to ongoing revenue nor changes service levels can be executed by the administration without legislative approval. Purpose of that is if I need to make changes to my department's overall structure, as long as we're within the boundaries of how much, our budget when it comes to our recurring expenses and so on. And then we're not causing more, right, of that over time and creating a future funding obligation, that we should be able to make those organizational changes internally to help deliver really the service that we need to without having to come to council and spend 2 to 3 weeks trying to explain what we're doing in terms of our own chart overall. So that was really the intention of that section 5.6.2. Next, provided some definitions regarding capital outlays, capital programs, and capital projects within 6.0, which for those playing at home, that's page 19 your packet. I'm trying to move as fast as you guys are when it comes to this. Part of the reason why, so we've also have updated section 6.2, which states the capital program or project appropriations are authorized by council. We subtracted out fund at the program or project level and reviewed through period project updates and reporting identified in this section. The reason why that we modified that and removed fund and replaced it with program or project level is to really emphasize that we're attempting to move to a continued appropriation for these projects so that there's one total project budget that can exist beyond, say, a year or 2-year period for the most part. That will help us kind of with that overall. And we really want to emphasize that because we understand that tables like this are relatively confusing to both council as well as the public. And it would be great to actually subtract a column from that total and actually just focus on what is the life project budget and whether we are actually remaining within that instead of having to potentially, remain within our life project budget, but then exceed our biennial budget and require a budget to come forward in the future, which just complicates and confuses the matter even more. And we'd hope to avoid those situations in the future. Beyond that, we just briefly updated the debt management section 7.2. Basically just clarifying that the issuance of councilmanic limited tax general obligation bonds for capital projects that are authorized to be supported by the general fund or capital project funds through the capital improvement plan for debt service requirements. Just making sure to acknowledge that we can use REIT funds in essence to support any sort of bond issuance that may be taking place within the CIP. So that is the value and that change that we see there. And then I think we're getting to the last one here when it comes to long-term financial planning. Overall, we also kind of modified that multiple financial models, including a governmental financial forecast, which addresses really the general fund and reserve fund, a governmental capital financial plan, which is the CIP, the non-utilities portion, the CIP that you've received recently. And then in addition to that, there are the enterprise financial plan, which is often presented through the utility rate study and a 6-year CIP, as well as an internal cost allocation plan, which addresses the replacement schedule of important assets such as vehicles and software systems. And so we just wanted clarity when it comes to, there isn't just one model, but there's actually multiple models that we're bringing to council on a pretty consistent basis. And so with that said, I know that was a quick kind of run through overall. hopefully it didn't surprise too many people necessarily, but thank you for the time on this and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Councilmember Johnson, do you have any questions at this time?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of taking them in reverse order. For 6.2, the capital improvement plan, cool, love the idea. Only thing is, they just want to make sure, that there might be a bullet point on there. Let me read it real quick. If you go back to, oh, okay. Never mind. Was just, that we'd had a discussion about, making sure that council is kept up to date, that there isn't something like oh gee whiz, sorry, it was way over budget. But now that we're, 5 years into the project and, we're $10 million in, we need an extra 2. Whereas, if we'd have known that we were drifting off course earlier and this wasn't that big of a priority and we really didn't want to sink an extra $2 million, but and we could have stopped it 2 years earlier, then we would have had that opportunity. It's sort of like don't come back and just tell us that there's a problem that we need to pay for when you knew way back then and hid it from us. And not accusing anyone of actually doing that, only saying that if it's not written that that's not going to happen, that it could. So yeah, it's basically just sort of like we need to have the appropriate level of accountability. All of us do. And yeah, I feel like I don't have the ability to do that if I don't know what's going on. So I just wanted to be spelled out what the process would be. Is this going to be like make sure you check in every month, every 6 months, every year? Just like, what's the plan to make sure that we're staying informed on the project, and is it currently on track to the best of staff's ability? Obviously things happen. So of course I'm talking to the best of staff's ability to project.
No, I think that's a very fair point. In the past, we did used to bring on a quarterly basis, basically kind of a utilities picture overall, say utilities CIP picture. I think we need to kind of get that going back to doing that for the most part. A lot of that is related to the level of service question overall and where we're having our staff spend their time. When it comes to the financial department overall, a lot of what you're kind of referencing is this concept called earned value management. I think overall we could try to incorporate that or work towards incorporating that as an overall method that we would deploy and finding out exactly where we are in comparison to the budget and how much we expected to spend by this date. Those can help to answer those questions about whether we think we're going to exceed the project budget in say 2 years time or 3 years time. So some of those are methods that we have to deploy and work towards deploying overall. But in terms of, I think the accountability piece, having some thought here that might state, we need to come back in a periodic basis, maybe quarterly, to review where we are when it comes to the utility CIP. And then receiving your questions, well, do we feel like we're on track? Or are we off track? Ideally, that's where the methodology would come into play for them to point out and say, no, we are on track, or no, we're off track based on where we thought we were going to be with the budget spent. So.
Yeah, that's what I appreciate seeing. I do have one other, but if you want to fill the question on a different one.
That's
Okay. The other one I want to talk about was on 5.6.2. I understand the idea completely, that as long as levels of service are good, then who cares what's going on? And I guess in a way that phrase does kind of answer my question. I just want to make sure that I've raised the concern. All right. So perfect example of where my concern would be is in the police department, where they have a mental health specialist, for lack of better remembering of what the proper name is for the job title. But yeah, they have that person. And if staff felt like, we just really don't want to have that expenditure, I realize that a lot of that has been funded by the state historically. Who knows for how long that will occur, but it seems as though based on prior council discussions and from the administration that that's a great thing. But if someone just decided, I just really don't want to have that extra position, we can spread that out through some less specifically trained police officers to do that kind of work. And we'll just say that we check the box under this. I just want to make sure that that's the kind of thing that couldn't happen under our noses. And then we suddenly as a council, like, oh, well, we have this position. The staff says, no, we don't. We got rid of them 2 years ago. Like, what? When did that happen? Yeah.
So just, I guess let me go to the section here just briefly overall. So this is within the budget amendment section. I think we have to keep in mind that we can't shift budgets necessarily between really our funds and functional classifications. So for example, it's not like the administration can move a utility position in order to support a general fund position. And in fact, what we've got within the general fund right now is functional classifications. So the ability to move a police department position towards an administrative position or somewhere within the general fund, but outside of the police department, we couldn't do overall. So there are certain restrictions like that in place. As I said, establishing levels of service is going to be really critical to that. And we'd have to define maybe what a level of service is actually, what does that look like? Often levels of service are established with performance metrics overall. So think about a police department metric that might involve mental health overall and how many calls are responded to, right? Maybe council's looking for 20 per month, depending on what happens, or right, things like that. If we're not achieving that, if that goes to zero, then we're basically in violation of this policy at that stage, I think at that point. So just some thought.
And another thing, of course, for us to remember is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that what council does is appropriate funds that the administration could expend, and that includes hiring FTEs and stuff, but it doesn't require that those FTEs actually be filled, correct? Along with other kinds of things. It's not a requirement that that money be spent. So to that degree, in a way, the administration would have a method of, if they don't think that this position is worth it, then they just don't hire someone to fill it. But I guess it was just sort of like I wouldn't want this to be an easier way to eliminate a position that is of high value to residents, to council, etc.
I think it'd be more for community development, for instance. It's so we have senior planners that are already classified, for positions. They decided, well, let's start with a junior planner. We should be able to switch between junior probably makes sense versus a senior planner at this point. So that type of classification. Versus hiring,
The intent.
right, versus hiring an admin person instead of the police officer, right? So we need to stay within the classifications.
Mhm.
We can think about that one a little bit more. But yeah, okay. All right. Do you have any other ones that you'd like to bring up?
Those are the two that I want to talk about.
Okay.
And also this is a fantastic job with the red lines and the underlines and the highlights. Makes it so easy for us to,
I'm running out of options now, so.
Next
Cool,
time I'll have to be
we'll have to
green.
change the color of the next go around, yeah.
I'll look through the updated copy a little bit more and then send you an email if there are additional questions.
Yeah, please feel free to send me emails if you have any questions or feedback overall in regards to this exercise. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next item up for discussion is the Enterprise Resource Planning Project Status Update, the ERP.
Okay, so I guess that's me again. So we're just going to provide a little ERP project status update overall for the F&E committee. I'm asking the same three questions. What has changed in resources? Well, there haven't really been any changes internally, but we will note that there is a new Tyler implementation consultant that has been assigned to the city who will really begin roughly in October. So we've got an implementation consultant working with our HR and budget team right now regarding the payroll modules overall. We're going to be running out of his time, I think, overall come September around that time frame overall. And so they're going to have to adjust someone else to come work with us during that time period. He's already got other assignments kind of lined up for the most part, which is why we can't have him all the way. But we're looking forward to working with that new person eventually and ideally getting more of the current implementation consultant's time, whatever he has available during those months as well. But got at least a backup implementation consultant that will be working with us during that time. He also has family here in Snoqualmie, so he's very excited actually to begin working with us when it comes to that. Another question, where are we going? As we've stated before, new year, new processes. The goal is to really complete the human capital management and the enterprise asset management phases by the end of the year. Previously, that statement was to complete all three phases by the end of the year. I've struck the utilities billing module because I just don't think we're going to have enough time or focus on that. We haven't been assigned a Tyler implementation consultant yet. Plus, obviously, we're highly focused on getting this payroll up and running and correct for the most part. Another third question is, where are we currently? And so I'm just going to go directly to the human capital management phase, phase number 2. The budget and HR teams are leading the implementation of this phase. So thank you to Jana and Jen for kind of stepping in and helping with this. Chair.
So going back to utilities billing, you said that you've stricken it all together, and we won't move
Well, no,
forward with
we
it at all,
haven't.
or?
It's not removed from the contract. I just don't have a time yet in which we've got that we can devote to it necessarily. And plus, they haven't assigned us an implementation consultant yet. So we do intend to fully move forward with that phase of the contract. But right now, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to really finish that by the end of the year. We're hoping to potentially start it in the third quarter or the fourth quarter generally, but obviously if we're to do it during that time period, it's going to carry into the next year.
Mhm.
In addition, it's very important for us to get it right because a high touch point for the public with the city itself is through your utility bills. And so it's very, very important that we make sure that there's no mistakes when that transition takes place. So I'm assuming it's going to take quite some time. I know Issaquah certainly had some struggles when it comes to that overall. And we want to get it right the first time. So where are we currently when it comes to the human capital management phase? They've been working really, really hard behind the scenes. I've got a number of tasks completed. I was surprised by the email list that I received from Jen today and how much was actually done, I think, overall during that time period. So they've created, audited, and finalized job classes, positions, pay codes, deduction and benefit codes. They've audited and finalized tables for medical, dental, vision, life insurance, additional life insurance accruals such as vacation, longevity. They've done some mapping when it comes to the general ledger as well to make sure that that flows correctly. In addition to that, they've started and established processes for how to calculate overtime rates. HR, as I said, has been involved in this conversation too, and they've been working in tandem with the budget team to get through this project. And they've been updating their PAR processes. PAR is personal action request form. So I know I didn't write that out necessarily fully, but that's what it means. They've created all the PAR codes. They've created PAR workflows, and they have identified roles and approvers basically for our payroll modules in total. So one of the new things that you'll see actually that has changed color fairly recently, the time and attendance. It used to be dark red and now it's rose, I guess we'll go. It's the color for that overall because they've been spending time actually focusing on the time and attendance a little bit and kickstarting that process. The goal would be to have time and attendance kind of up and running by the go live date overall, and we'll kind of discuss the go live date too. But it'd be great to transition everyone away from paper timesheet records basically to a portal where they can input their time information, the regular hours and their overtime hours, and have that populate within the system instead of having someone actually manually enter that each and every time. So we're looking forward to that date in which we can get there. Other tasks completed include establishing employees. They've audited various applications and codes for accuracy. They've identified differences between hourly and salary employees. They've entered information for 4 out of 5 different employee groups out there. And in regards to the system in general, they've signed an agreement with the bank to obtain all routing of bank information for direct deposit import. They've been practicing time entry, which is really key, and they've started a payroll to verify functionality. So they've been actually starting to really test the system, which will the transition from this orange color that you see more into the yellow. But that's been all going on behind the scenes, and I can't thank them enough for moving in that direction. Just for everyone's benefit, the new scheduled go live date is January 1 of 2025. We did move that from October 1 of 2025 to January 1 of 2025. It really gives time for the budget team to focus on the 25-26 biennial budget during the months of August and September. So we've opened up a gap there for them to be able to focus on that. I'm gonna need Jana and Jen really for that discussion with council. Once the budget is completed in October, which is the date in which the budgets we expect to be adopted, the team will turn its attention back to the ERP project to get that ready for the go live date of January 1 of 2025. And really the new scheduled go live date helps us to eliminate the need for data conversion for the legacy system to the new system. So we don't have all this kind of additional back-end database coding work to do in order to get information out of our legacy system into the new one for the most part. That's important for things such as W-2s. Imagine having a W-2 in the new system, having to transfer all that information from the legacy system to the new system in order to produce W-2s. It would be a very challenging endeavor. And even Tyler has recommended that we make sure it's actually at the beginning of the year instead of trying to do it at some point during the mid-year. In terms of the enterprise asset management, phase 4 overall, Jeff and his team, especially Brendan Ecker, have been working really hard on that. Phase itself, they have been reviewing the asset types, assets and activity codes uploaded to the testing environment. They've been using the system to create test work orders, sort and search assets, and become familiar with the user interface. And they've been determining that certain items need to be removed, updated, or if they're just in general missing, what do they have to go through and actually update? So they've been working on really kind of starting to really test the system overall. They've inputted a lot of information. Now they're really starting to test the system. They're close to linking our GIS to Munis, which is really key overall. If you've got someone in the field that's looking at trying to conduct finish a task order for a certain asset, they'll be able to go find what that asset is or where that asset's located, look for it all within their iPad or whatever they have overall, and then do the service or complete the order and really move on to the next task after that. We're also finalizing user types for each division and their employees over the next month. And really the projected go live date for this phase itself is September the 30th right now. And so with that said, I think that's it really for the update, the ERP project update.
All right. Thank you. Any questions?
No.
All right, thank you, Drew. Director Peters. All right, the next item up looks like it will be yours as well. The deliberation and review of the mayor's proposed 2025 to 2030 CIP for non-utilities.
So I think at this stage, we do have Jeff, our Parks and Public Works Director with us. We'd love to walk through our community center presentation, which if you were present in the audience, we did get through a lot of that at the Parks and Public Works Committee, but we'd love to kind of start that presentation for council as well here in the F&A Committee and provide that to you guys. So I'll go sit down.
That I gave you is something I'm going to talk about. It's closer so I don't have to yell. I can't really put all that information in the slide. So I thought I'd just give it to you because I figure you might ask about it. We're going to talk about it. I'll give you a summary of what's on there. But the information is there in case you want to look at it in a little bit more depth. So purpose of this presentation is to kind of give you an update on where we're at on the project and let you know that we've been busy mobilizing this project, keeping it moving forward. And we want to give you an update. We are, closing in on some decision points here, milestones on the project, and we want to get you up to date on everything that's going on. We're covering two things primarily. One is to give you an update on the design and development of the community center plans and drawings themselves. So where we're at with that development phase. And then also to present the funding plan for that and how it fits in with the CIP. Next slide. So you probably recognize this slide. This is basically tracking our progress. we've already now gone through all of the programming, schematic and design development phases for the project. And you recall at the end, in February, we had finished our design development and we still had a fair funding gap on where we were at and where we wanted to get with our funding and with our design. So what we've been doing is, well, I'm going to talk about what we've been doing, but where we're at now is we need to make some decisions on what we're doing with the plans and the project and what we're going to do with the funding. Once we get through that portion of it, if council approves of the funding plan, then we will we'll direct our contractor to give us a guaranteed maximum price. And then we will move forward with a second agreement to finish the permitting and design. And if all goes well, we could start construction by the end of this summer. Next slide, please. What we've been doing, fundraising. Primarily, we're looking at every aspect of it, but what we've done in the last couple of months is sending applications to the legislative branches to get appropriations. We've applied to most of our legislators, so that's all pending. We've only received one response on that, so we're waiting to find out more from the others. Excuse me. We've also had an outreach to potential partners. So we actually crafted a letter to formally invite partners. That includes North Bend, Skyview, the school district, and we've done additional outreach with the tribe and also additional appeals to the YMCA to extend the funding there. And then the third thing we've been up to is looking at finance options. And we'll talk more about that later. That's Drew's going to cover that portion of the presentation. Now, the next thing we've been doing is price reduction, trying to reduce the price because the gap was one, how do we pay for this? And the other side is how do we get the price down so that we can cover the gap? And so we've been meeting with our designers and our contract to go through all of the various options, looking at materials, looking at equipment, looking at design options to try to get the cost down. And the idea is we want to maintain all of the functionality or as much of the functionality as we can, but reduce the cost. So we're looking for that value option. And so we were actually able to make some significant reductions. I'll talk about here in a minute. The next thing we looked at is the phase development option. And you can move forward. So if we break the project into two phases, we can get to a place where we can reasonably fund the project. Phase one would be the pool, and pretty much, I would say 95% of everything that we really wanted, all the essential elements. It includes, the pool, the reception area, the new entrance offices, the patio, the community areas, and all of those things. None of that has changed. That is all still the essential. What's changed is maybe some of the materials and things that we've done to reduce costs. Phase two, excuse me, would be the dry fitness area in red. So you'll see there's two fitness studios. They were over there. You go to the next slide. I kind of talk about it there. So phase one, natatorium and locker room complex, the new reception area, the community room and the kitchenette, patio facilities and offices, as we discussed. 6-lane access, 6-lane lap pool, competition lap pool, and a recreation pool. Also, like I said, everything as we had in the ultimate plan, it would remain in the phase one concept. Phase two would be the 2 dry studios, the expanded kids watch area. We still will retain the existing kids watch area, but without the improvements. And then there was a canopy structure, which we may keep or we could delete from the project altogether to save cost. And then there's the walkway from Bridge Street that comes up, and we could potentially do that as a separate project. Standalone projects we could maybe do with other budgets. So the idea is to get that phase one, get everything that we want or essential elements that we want in the phase one portion of it. That, of course, was coordinated with the YMCA to make sure that the facility could maintain financial viability. So we're very confident with this moving forward, and YMCA concurs with this development package as a partner. Next slide. So cost. We have two costs, and that's what's shown on the sheet that I gave you. So there's the full program, the ultimate configuration with all the cost reduction involved. This is minus escalation. So this doesn't include escalation costs, but full program 29.2. If we break it into phases, we can save essentially $2 million off the initial cost. That's useful because that gets us to a place where we can actually fund this thing through our various options that Drew's going to talk about here next. One important distinction here is that these costs are estimates. This is not the guaranteed maximum price. The guaranteed maximum price could be lower or it could be a little bit higher. It all depends on when we intend to construct it. So escalation, like I said, is not included in this. If we wait, the cost goes up, of course. And if we can move forward soon, then the cost will be pretty close to what we're showing here. So to talk about our funding plan and how it fits with the CIP, Drew's going to take over for here.
I guess, can we point out on the worksheets? So you show the total there, the 27,267
Yes.
million. And if you look at the worksheet, you need to add, we added on there art, labor, and construction management, and adding those additional items. I guess you deducted for the 28.9 million, you end up with the 27.2.
That's correct. So the estimated cost for construction is shown on there in the construction line item, but there's other additional costs. So the design portion of it, that's captured in the design phase. And so what we wanted to make sure that those numbers line up. So the numbers that are shown on this worksheet so match up what we just showed up on the slide.
Question.
Mhm.
Oh, no. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't know how far down in the weeds we wanted to go here, but I'll say this just really quickly. Just I think it's weird that fireproofing is struck out on both columns. So curious about that, but don't want to go too far into the weeds. I'm sure there's some explanation. So bigger picture, we have phase one full program versus phase one reduced scope. I'm just a little bit confused as to which is what. I see a number on the worksheet that says 28.9, and then I see two numbers on this other sheet. One is 29.2 and the other one is 27.2. Just confused about what numbers I'm supposed to be looking at. Like what is the current proposal?
So at the very bottom, those numbers line up with these numbers here.
And what's the
Very bottom.
Got it. Yes.
So I guess your question is,
Okay, so at the top of the blue, it says phase one full program. So
yes.
that is still a phased approach, but the idea that we would not ever do
sorry.
something in the future, and then phase one reduced scope is
I'm
sorry.
sorry. So, yeah, because this is a goofy issue that's kind of come up on here. The phased approach is different than phase one development. So phase one development is the pre-engineer, the pre-design, all of this, what we've been doing up till design development, that's phase one. In contractor speak. Phase two is the construction.
Okay.
Right? So when we talk about phased approach, we're not talking about, phase one design, phase two construction. We're talking about phase one development and phase two development. So that is confusing. I admit it's confusing, but I this was developed by the contractor. So I could have asked him to go back and say, all right, take out the phase thing in here. So
Okay.
because it'll confuse people.
So instead of calling it phase one of them is
Full program.
The other one is reduced scope.
Reduced,
There are
yeah.
some things we would just never get to.
The reduced scope is phases 1 and 2. But this only demonstrates phase 1.
Okay,
Phase 2 has been cut out.
got it.
this
So
cost.
full program means we don't do the phased approach at all. We just
Build the
go
whole
all
thing.
in.
So if
Thank you
somebody
so
shows
much.
up, a benefactor with $10 million.
Right.
Problem solved. We do the whole thing.
So then the only other thing is, the worksheet says 28.9, which is neither of those two. So it's just gives.
Right, that's what I was trying to explain. So there's additional costs that we would add to it, which is art, our labor,
Got it.
and construction management.
Yeah.
So those three
this-
items.
This is the cost of construction estimate.
Got it.
This
Thank you.
is the city CIP budget, which includes our time and some soft costs. They go to it.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, so good evening once again, members of the F&A committee. I'm here to talk about the funding side of this equation. I think overall, we're going to discuss it in the context of the CIP. Just to give some background a little bit, the city recently released the mayor's proposed 25 through 2030 CIP. CIP currently includes a proposal to fund and construct a community center expansion project. And what I'm sure is probably on council's mind is why did the administration include the project in the CIP, as well as what is the administration's proposal to fund the project to completion? Just a little bit more background. Overall, the city has reached a design build checkpoint. It's coming up here shortly. The design development phase is complete and the contractor is prepared to present the city with a guaranteed price. City has brought the CIP and the community center expansion project to council together for consideration so that it can really understand the holistic impact of the project on our governmental capital financial bucket. If you're to separate out the two, wouldn't be as effective necessarily overall. We want to understand what is the impact of the community center on the overall broad capital program that we have in total. So when it comes to the governmental capital financial bucket, we're focusing on that column that's in blue right there. Governmental capital accounts for the provision of non-utility capital assets. It's funded primarily through restricted taxes and fees, committed taxes and fees and grants, and includes things such as transportation, parks, facilities, and facility capital expenditures. And often the financial product that we produce basically to reflect what that financial plan is within governmental capital is the CIP itself. So the CIP is a long-term 6-year lookout for the most part of how we intend to spend our money during that 6-year period. And it helps to share basically with council what projects and programs we intend to complete and to make sure that we can try to cover all that we possibly can. Now, there are some distinctions that we just want to note very quickly for you. Governmental operating, which is the general fund primarily, accounts for important services such as police and fire. And they're usually funded, or those services are usually funded by ongoing operating revenues. For governmental capital, there's a very bright line distinction between kind of the revenue sources that we would use. We would use ongoing capital revenues or one-time revenues basically to fund the CIP and governmental capital in this bucket. And so we need to make that distinction very, very clear, I think, overall. Now, the question that you might ask is, why did the administration include this project in the CIP? Well, it's because we believe that there is strong and consistent community support for the project. This is one of the questions that took place in the recent 2023 community survey. The administration would note that the 60% or 66% that answered this question believe that the city should move forward with the project. 21% believe that the city should not be moving forward with the community center expansion project, and 13% did not have an opinion one way or the other when it comes to including the community center expansion project within the city CIP. In addition to that, we would note that there are other surveys certainly out there that have been conducted over time that also demonstrate relatively robust support for the community center. 2019, for example, the city's community survey at that time with 72% in support of the community center. When it comes to our kind of local Upper Valley, other jurisdictions, We would note that Sideview, for the most part, in 2020, 56% voted in favor of the capital bond at that time. In addition, for the subsequent years after that, in 2022, 58% voted in favor of it and 56% voted in favor of it. So there is generally support, not just within the city itself, but within the surrounding area too. We would also note for council's benefit that the Snoqualmie Valley School District in 2019 conducted an aquatics investment survey as well, which showed that 73% strongly supported an aquatic center, as well as 21% had somewhat support for the aquatic center at that time. In addition to that, there's even more. The city has been conducting a Parks, Recreation, Open Space and Trails Master Plan, as known as PROST overall. As a part of that, there was a survey conducted to support that effort overall. Certainly some of the questions that were asked included elements that would relate to the expansion of the community center, and I just want to go into those very briefly with you. And I know this is going to be difficult to see on your screen overall, so I'm going to zoom in. This is actually question 9 from that survey that was conducted, which the question that was asked was, which 4 types of facilities, amenities from the list in question 8 are most important to your household? They have a legend here, basically ranking those of importance. Green is first, red is second, and third is black, and fourth is blue overall. The aquatics pool facility listed here, in essence, received the most support as being the highest ranked of importance overall in regards to the other facilities, such as baseball, softball diamonds, basketball courts, and other kind of different park features as well. Also, just note, well, basically at the top there, you can kind of see that out of the number of respondents, we had roughly, I believe, 118 respondents for this. So roughly 30 to 35 of those respondents ranked the aquatics pool facility as the most important for the city to actually complete in comparison to the other options that they had available to them. Also, I'll just note that the people that ranked it as number 2 are very sizable as well. Within 10 to 15 respondents in total. And so for those that have ranked it either or second in terms of their importance overall, you're achieving roughly about 40 to 50% of the total respondents of this survey that ranked that first or second. Moving back to the presentation itself, and that is just one more additional element that we believe supports this project and its inclusion within the CIP. And then lastly, I just want to remark upon the planning efforts so far that the city has conducted over time. The community center has been referenced in multiple documents to date, such as the Snoqualmie Ridge mixed use plans, comprehensive plans, functional plans, as well as multiple CIPs in the past. One example is the Open Space Parks and Recreation from 2018. The table that you have in front of you, table 9.6, references the level of service standards that the city is expected to meet. Over time, for the most part, as a part of those level of service standards, a swimming pool was included as a part of that. 1 swimming pool for every 12,500 residents. Right now, we've got a population approaching 15,000. In addition to that, the community center level of service standard was roughly 1 for every 10,000 residents in total. So expanding the other elements of the community center will help us to achieve that level of service standard as set by this plan back in 2018. Next, I'm going to delve right into the financial plan itself. But before I get to what we've incorporated into the 2030 CIP, I just want to remark upon what you have seen in the 2023-2028 CIP itself. The total project budget at that time was $2.34 million. Of that $2.34 million, we expected to fund that through one-time sales tax revenue of roughly $7.7 million, real estate excise tax of roughly $7.49 million, and then another category called grants, appropriations, or other sources. Can include grants from the King County Aquatics Grant, for example, a state direct appropriation, or other sources such as the bond. That was in essence at our time that funding gap, which you've probably heard $13.1 million for the most part, that we were looking for other sources to make up for that difference in time. Turning to today, what is incorporated into your 25 through 2030 CIP, the total project budget that we're asking for is $28.92 million, which is roughly a 2% increase over the previous CIP. In addition to that, in terms of funding that $28.92 million, we've got roughly $10.51 million available in one-time sales tax revenue, roughly $7 in the real estate excise tax revenue, a $2.5 million contribution from the YMCA, as well as a $1 million grant from King County, the King County Parks Levy. Roughly, if we were to add those two up and divide it by the project budget, that's roughly equal to 12.1% of the project budget. And then to make up for the difference, we also have an interim financing solution in the form of a line of credit equal to $5.2 million to get us to the $28.92 million project budget in total. Just want to go over a couple of those revenue sources just really quickly. In terms of one-time sales tax revenue, it was collected from the construction of Snoqualmie Ridge, as well as other construction projects that have taken place across the city. A longstanding policy of council is to utilize that one-time really development-related construction sales tax revenue for one-time capital investments such as the community center. And so as a consequence, we have set that money aside from the general fund and transferred it to the non-utilities capital funds so that we can accomplish and fulfill that policy overall, because we really don't want to utilize that money on supporting our services, our reoccurring services, our ongoing services such as police and fire. So in terms of our ability to check and analyze and make sure that we're sustainable in the general fund, it was critical for us to make sure that that money was directed to another place so that we weren't accounting for it when we, provided or spent money on police salaries and things like that over time. In addition, the real estate excise tax is a restricted revenue source that can be only used for purposes as established by state law, which in this case is there for capital. Because it's there for capital, we can't use it on operating expenses necessarily, say within the general fund, such as police and fire. And so consequently, we are restricted to using those funds for capital purposes, which is why it's been incorporated into this project and into the CIP overall. Now, an important question that you may have is, what is interim financing? Or in this instance, what is a line of credit? It's really just a short-term financial instrument that would eventually get rolled into a bond. You can think of it similar to a bond that has maybe just a maturity of a year for the most part before it gets rolled over into a longer-term bond overall. What that helps us to do basically is, and I've got a number of pros here, basically it helps us to well, if the rates decrease over time, if the interest rates decrease over time, then having just a year maturity before we have to roll it into a longer term bond, we may be able to see those rates decrease. And in fact, that is what a lot of economists would be forecasting, is they're pricing in rate cuts later this year in regards to the Fed funds rate, which will help to actually decrease the interest rate over time. And so consequently, if you were to take out a bond fairly immediately, we'd be stuck at the higher interest rate at this time for a good period of time before we could either call the bond or we'd have to wait the full 20-year period. Taking out a line of credit will help us to keep the interest rate relatively lower, or hopefully in time we'll find ourselves at the lower interest rate and therefore reduce our interest expenses over time. Also, another pro of the line of credit is funds are drawn from the line of credit if and when needed. So there is the possibility that we can reduce the size of the bond over time, but we need to give ourselves a chance in order to see that through. In addition, it helps us to provide flexibility and timing and for the nature of a long-term funding plan. There are some potential consequences of this, and it's instead of actually seeing our interest rates decrease over time, there's the possibility that interest rates may increase over time. Despite the wisdom of economists, I think out there for the most part. So if they do increase over time, they get into a longer term bond, might result in a higher interest rate, and therefore the city will pay the price for that through additional interest charges. In addition, most providers charge a modest commitment fee on undrawn but available amounts, and there are upfront costs associated with establishing the line of credit. So the process of a line of credit typically involves soliciting proposals from various commercial banks. A line of credit is often characterized as a bond under state law, and so only be authorized or can be authorized by a bond resolution, which means we'd have to bring it back to council for approval, no matter what. So that is in essence interim financing. Now, if we were to roll it into a bond, if the city were to use the entire $5.2 million line of credit, and roll it into a bond issuance, we would propose a term of roughly 20 years on that bond. Right now, we're estimating roughly true interest cost of 3.7%. The average annual payment on that $5.2 million is roughly $375,000 per year. That's your annual principal and interest payment on that 5.2 portion of the bond. The total debt service over that term would be roughly $7.45 million, which would equal the $5.2 million in principal plus the $2.25 million in interest. The approval of the bond would be councilmanic. It does not require a vote of the residents and would not come out of property taxes. And the bond would be paid back over 20 years using real estate excise taxes, which comes from the buying and selling of homes. So a question you may have is, why do governments finance projects through bonds? We have done this in the past with City Hall, the fire station, the police station. Well, one important concern is the time value of money. It helps mitigate construction cost inflation over time. Consequently, if we're to pause this project and wait for an additional 2 years, we're going to see inflation really increase the cost and escalate the cost for this project over time. And so if we can get it built today, it will save us from those inflationary pressures that we'll see over the next 2 years and ideally help us to save on those expenses. As well as it allows us for faster project delivery. It's more advantageous to the beneficiaries of the project, so we can get the project done faster overall, and the people can experience the benefits of that facility faster than having to wait, for example, 2 years. In addition to that, there's also an important concept called intergenerational equity, which basically means matching up the use of the facility with those who pay for the related debt service. So there are people that will likely move into the community over the next 20-year period, but then also move out of the community too, who should be paying for a portion of that debt service over time. We don't necessarily want the current residents of this place to pay for the entirety of the project. It should also, people that are going to be moving here in the future should also be paying for a portion of that through their taxes and so on, because they will be benefiting from that if they were to move into the community after this project is built. So an important question that you're probably asking is, will the community center and the bond financially challenge the city overall? Will it create a structural imbalance in governmental capital that we will never recover from? And what I'm here to tell you is, while things will certainly get tighter, and they're tight within the CIP, the answer is currently no. And that's because we've got 3 litmus tests that we often use to kind of judge whether we're going to be sustainable over time or if we're going to create a structural imbalance. And so I've got those listed here. The first one is maintaining a reserve level and fund balance that provides the insurance the city needs should a capital asset require immediate replacement or projections are not met. So we are certainly maintaining a reserve level. If you were on councils, or especially this committee is familiar with financial policies, right? Overall, we are maintaining that reserve level that we are building into those financial policies as the draft that's been provided to you at 1.5 times our total annual debt service. And so what you're going to see is actually the fund balance that we're maintaining as a reserve within the CIP is actually higher than what was incorporated into the 23-28 CIP. Another factor that kind of supports this case overall is we're still funding critical capital programs, such as street resurfacing, sidewalk replacements, and we're doing that at current service levels before funding the community center expansion project. So we prioritized that first before funding the community center expansion project. In addition to that, we've also included 2 additional programs within that equation. And Dylan over here also made sure to incorporate any sort of inflationary increases that we've experienced since the approval of the last CIP as well, so that we are covering those inflationary increases as well with that. So we made sure to fund those critical capital programs first. And then lastly, we have also ensured that ongoing capital revenues exceed the amount spent on capital programs and debt service. And often we're calculating a ratio when it comes to that. The city's not going to be relying upon one-time funding sources to pay for the replacement of key assets or ongoing principal and interest payments. And we've got a couple tables to share with you in regards to that overall. So the top table that we have here is our ongoing capital sources that we've extracted for the CIP, which includes restricted capital taxes, such as your real estate excise tax that we're going to be collecting on an annual basis, your restricted transportation taxes, such as the TBD sales tax and the motor vehicle fuel tax. And then we also have a third category called committed capital taxes, which includes your utility tax that's devoted and committed to the capital improvement plan. Our ongoing capital uses includes capital program expenditures as well as debt service that we've pulled directly from the CIP and put into this table right here. As stated, capital programs include things such as your street resurfacing, your sidewalk replacements, your playground replacements, your trail replacements, and a lot of things that we need to do in order to maintain our current assets as they're currently built. So with that said, if you were to compare our ongoing capital sources to our ongoing capital uses, we find that our ongoing capital sources are actually greater than our ongoing capital uses, and we've got basically a row down below that's highlighted in green. So for 2025, we expect to generate roughly $870,000 more in ongoing capital sources than in ongoing capital uses for 2025. And that's relatively consistent generally across the 6-year period. We actually looked and done a bit more of a deeper dive in this, really reflecting on what in maybe a more stringent definition is. And so if you were to take out transportation overall, taking out the restricted transportation taxes in general, as well as what we've committed from our utility tax, which is there to devote to transportation, and compare that against our ongoing capital uses. We would note that for 5 out of the 6 years, we're still in the green, although overall for 2029, we know that we dip in 2029 below our total ongoing capital uses during that. So if you were to remove transportation, things get a bit tighter. But for at least 5 out of the 6 years in this picture overall, our ongoing capital sources still exceed our ongoing capital uses in total. So one of the questions as well that you may have is, how could the city reduce the line of credit over time? So how can we actually shrink that $5.2 million? Well, there are some situations that potentially could arise over the next couple of years, such as if the guaranteed maximum price comes in under budget. We're hopeful for that. And we will note that obviously hope is not a strategy. And so often what we're doing is we're actually preparing for the worst case scenario, especially within the CIP. There's the possibility that if the city receives additional grant funding or other contributions, that would help to reduce the line of credit too. We note that we're looking to go back out for another King County Aquatics grant, roughly equal to the amount that Skyview had to turn back over to King County, I think overall. And just for council's benefit, if we were to even receive $1 million from King County, that would help to shave off $72,000 off the annual debt service payment in total. So helps us to actually increase that, our sustainability overall, if we were to be able to just get some money in the door to reduce that line of credit. In addition, if the city exceeds its revenue forecast in the CIP or other projects coming under budget, we can then redeploy that money towards the, reducing the line of credit. And then lastly, if the city has any excess cash within the general fund above the reserve level that council would agree to use towards this project is another potential option too. We will note certainly that the administration's recommendation, by including the community center, is that we would love the council to approve the project as included in CIP. But we do know that there's other options available to council, and we just want to kind of walk through those a little bit here. We have already phased the project, but you could phase the project even more if you wanted to. There are certainly some pros and cons, which comes with each and every option that you have to explore over the next month and a half or so. Certainly under option number 1, phasing the project, it will certainly complete a portion of the project in the immediate term, and we may no longer need or helps to reduce that line of credit potentially over that time. However, we will note that the additional phases will become more expensive over time, and the city may lose its purchasing power. It does postpone the benefits associated with an expanded community center and may not meet all the needs immediately. And it may also require some redesign work too, in order to phase that out appropriately. Another option available to council is to eliminate or delay other projects in the CIP. It certainly helps to create more funding certainty. We're able to transition the funding from another project to the community center. And it will help us to really reduce that kind of line of credit overall towards the project. Part of the challenge, however, is it does postpone the benefits associated with those other projects. And so council has to keep that in mind. Another option available to council is to reduce the scope of the project. It may create more funding certainty overall, and we may no longer need a line of credit, but it may only partially meet the needs of the community. It's going to require some redesign work overall, and reducing the scope may require some concurrence with the YMCA if they're willing to still participate or work with the city overall and remain as a partner in operating the facility moving forward. Another option for council is to delay or pause the project. That may potentially create more funding certainty depending on the commitment of others. For example, if we were to delay the project and actually go out and seek the King County grant and get that money in the door, that may provide council with more funding certainty overall, and it would help to reduce that line of credit. However, if we were to delay the project or pause the project will become more expensive over time, and the city may lose kind of purchasing power over time with the money that we've currently saved to date. Also, we'll postpone the benefits associated with an expanded community center for however long that is, the community center project is paused. And lastly, the other option to council is to eliminate the project completely. It creates obviously the most funding certainty because we're no longer going to be doing it, and allows for the funding of alternative projects. However, we would note that it would not match the public support for the project nor really meet the needs of the community. And in addition to that, we've also spent $2 million to date, which could be considered wasteful. Now, we also want to make sure that we touch upon really what I considered, well, actually, first, before I get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about construction cost inflation. And in addition to that, just mentioned the city of Snoqualmie has spent roughly $1.95 million so far on the project for feasibility, design, permitting, and legal support. That's a sunk cost. We can't recoup that necessarily. So once that's gone, that's gone. When it comes to construction cost inflation, we look back 6 years and would note that the annual increase in the cost of construction was roughly 4.87% during that 6-year time period. If we were to look at really what is a typical investment for the city, and it's a very, very safe investment, which is our local government investment pool, our average rate of return was roughly 1.95% in total. So, for example, if you're to look to pause this project for the next 2 years, we might assume that our cost of construction will increase maybe 9%, while the interest that we're going to generate on the money that we've saved and put back into the make might only increase 3%. And as a result, we may get farther and farther and farther away from the goal overall. Now, as I stated, I just want to touch on this as well, and that there's an elephant in the room. Obviously, the city is working on several large items or projects during the year and beyond. And the administration really does acknowledge that there may be reluctance to fund a strategic investment as a result of that. And certainly there is a lot of work, and we'll note that we're currently working through an SBA agreement, right, for the most part. Coming on the heels of that, we'll likely be working through a negotiation process with the International Association of Firefighters. Also note that we're still working through the North Bend Police Services contract, solid waste contract, biennial budget, CIP. There's plenty of other capital projects that we've got going on. And so there's a tendency potentially to just put the community center on pause and kind of wait, right, overall. We will note that we have kind of worked with council on strategies for how we're going to be able to get these other things across the line, and that there are potentially some positive financial impacts generally overall that we may see that could help to remedy maybe some of the issues that we've experienced, certainly since last year overall. And so we know that there's certainly an elephant in the room, and we would love to continue working with you, council, on how to solve those issues. But generally, this is the right time to bring the community center forward, and that's what we believe overall, because we're at this stage where we're at a checkpoint, and we don't believe that the other options are really feasible in order to get this project across the line. Certainly, risks do exist. Like I stated, if the project does not move forward, that includes escalating costs and the loss of purchasing power. Plus, there's also associated opportunity costs if we do see that inflation increase our project cost overall, which will not be able to deploy towards other projects. In addition to that, if we're worried about the general fund in total, I just want to remark that pausing the community center isn't necessarily a solution for our ongoing money problem within the general fund itself. It may buy us time if we want to redirect some of that money to the general fund, but the problem is still going to exist, which is that structural imbalance, which we've been dealing with for a long period of time now. But pausing this project may give us something optically overall, but it isn't a long-term solution for our general fund issues and our structural imbalances in that bucket over there. Lastly, I just want to remark upon some of the benefits in regards to the community center. The idea of the community center is it's going to provide basic swimming and water safety skills and help to reduce the risk of drownings overall. The goal is to improve health and mental wellness outcomes for all ages and abilities. We do know from previous surveys and things like that, from the YMCA in particular, that there has been overcrowding at the facility over time. We're looking to really meet that demand for before and after school programs, health and wellness programs, meeting space and fitness space. In addition, we would note that there likely to be increased economic activity in the Snoqualmie Ridge Business District by just people visiting. And then we'll be able to reduce retail leakage to other communities as a result of that. People travel to Issaquah, for example, to go, to their pool to take swimming lessons and things like that. They're likely, therefore, afterwards going to lunch or having dinner there with their families overall and paying sales tax in Issaquah. In addition, the community center will help us to create a more livable and attractive community. And lastly, it helps us to complete that vision for Snoqualmie Ridge that was started a good 25+ years ago in those master use plans too. And we're really looking forward to ideally fulfilling a promise that was made way back then during that time. And certainly that is our goal with this project and why it's included as a part of the CIP, why you have it in front of you. So with that said, and just thank you for your time and your attention, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Director Pate. Councilman Johnson, any questions?
Million questions. I'm not sure exactly how much time we're supposed to have for FNA, but I think we're getting there. So I'm going to go ahead and just hold my questions for now. But for all those at home, wait with bated breath, because I'm sure everyone on council is going to have a million questions.
And this will be,
But thank you, by the way, for the presentation. That was extremely helpful, and I hope that we get to see more similar soon.
and this will be coming on next week as well, correct?
Right.
From the full
So do
council?
you want to submit some of your questions so that we might be able to respond to them on Tuesday?
Yep, I was writing them down as we went, so
Perfect.
yeah, I will.
Lovely. In that case, I believe the next item up on the agenda is going to be the agenda for Tuesday, correct? I don't know who's sharing the screen at the moment. Are we able to get the screen up with the agenda?
Yes, who's doing that? Are you
I
on?
don't know, do you know? Are you doing that?
Usually we do now.
Are you on?
All right, so going down Tuesday's agenda, obviously we're meeting on Tuesday instead of Monday in light of the holiday. The first item up will be the solid waste contract hauler selection. That will be beginning the round table at 6. At 7, we'll go back down to all of order, roll call, pledge of allegiance, agenda approval. For public hearings, presentations, proclamations, and appointments, we do not have anything scheduled. For presentations, there will be deliberation and review of the mayor's proposed CIP for non-utilities. After that will be public financing and municipal bonds. Under proclamations, there will be Emergency Medical Services Week, Public Works Week, and then public comment for folks who are here in person. Councilman Johnson.
I think it's standard for us to put the presentations before the proclamations, but if we've got members of the public who are here to receive things from the proclamations, as is sometimes the case. That probably fit better before we go through the long deliberation about the mayor's proposal so that people can go home if they want to. If that's a more appropriate change to make at the time, then we could do it then.
Does the administration have a preference?
If we can make it now, it'd be great.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah. Let's do it.
Sounds great. Okay. So moving on from there, we'll have and again, if folks want to make public comments, they can do those by email, preference by 3 p.m. on the day of, if it's on for an item that is on the agenda. For consent agenda, we have the city council minutes from May 13th and the claims report. After that, for ordinances, it'll be AB 24054, emergency housing code amendment, second reading, Councilmember Johnson.
I believe that both items 9 and 11, community development had asked to be under the consent agenda.
9 being climate change task order and 11 being in the FEMA repetitive loss.
Correct.
So can we get those moved up for consent then? Okay,
That's right.
lovely, thank you. Okay, and so then following that, we'll go back to ordinance, which will be emergency housing, code amendments, public safety, CD, then they'll have the motion on environmental element will still be in that location, correct?
Yeah, I think there was some additional conversation we had there as well.
And then after that will be Parks and Public Works Committee, AB 24063 and AB 24068, the resolution awarding Public Works contract. And then we have a couple options for proposed actions. For FNA, there's nothing else. Community of the whole, there's nothing else. Under reports, we'll have mayor's report, commission committee liaison reports, and then we will have 2 executive sessions. It looks like, are those both still going forward?
So far, yes.
Executive and closed?
Yep.
Okay,
Just
all right, Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, just a quick question on executive session, since we tend to have them somewhat frequently. Is there any reason to not just always have that down there as potential executive session and list all the reasons why we could have it? And then we could just do them if we need to. Is there any reason to not do that?
Like we have it on there now.
Well, are there a couple of other reasons why you can have executive sessions? There's like a short list.
You can't just put them all.
You can't just do that. Okay, all right.
Okay. It's worth a shot, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, and then if there is nothing further, I don't have any additional revisions. Anyone else? All right, then I believe we are at the end of the agenda for FNA. So is there any reason why we should not be adjourned?
Nope.
All right, then we are adjourned.